This is Financially Fit Business with Ruth King.
Welcome to the Financially Fit Business Podcast. Here you discover ideas, tactics, news, and information that matters to the health of your business or your clients' businesses. I'm your host, Ruth King. Here's how we will help you increase the financial fitness of your business today. Subtle changes in P&L and balance sheet trends mean a lot. It's best to pay attention to these small changes and resolve them before they become major cash flow, productivity, or profitability problems. In the last episodes, I covered little changes in the overall gross profit and loss trends and changes in gross margin. In this episode, I'll discuss productivity changes. Let's get started. Remember that the definition of productivity is a number of payroll expenses, all payroll taxes divided by revenue. So you want to know for every dollar that comes in the door, how much you're spending on payroll and payroll taxes. I include, FICA and Medicare and unemployment. And obviously, if a company is union, I include the union dues. I don't include health insurance, workers' comp, 401ks, or any other types of benefits, because those are, for all intents and purposes, out of the goodness of your heart. Now, before you say workers' comp isn't, actually, if you look at the laws in some states, it actually is. You don't have to have workers' comp until you reach a certain level. And I think you're crazy not to have it, but that's my opinion. You want to roll the dice, that's just fine. Okay. So I look at that and the graphs here are counterintuitive. And here's what I mean by that. So if our productivity ratio or our compensation percentage ratio, both mean exactly the same thing, is 60%. That means 60 cents of every dollar is gone to pay payroll and payroll taxes. If it goes to 80%, which is the graph going in an upward trend, that's worse, because we're now spending 80 cents of every dollar on payroll and payroll taxes. Not the right way to go. Okay. So this is a really, really good measure of how well you use your employees. And I don't mean that from a negative perspective, but how productive they are, how good they are generating revenue, and those types of things. This gives you a really good sense of it. And the things that you have to be careful with this is if it's the monthly graphs, it generally goes within a particular range, especially if you have a seasonal business. And here's what I mean by seasonal businesses. You have slow times and busy times. In slower times, your productivity ratio goes up because you have less revenue and you still are paying all of your people. In really, really busy times, your productivity ratios go down because your people are probably as effective and efficient as they possibly can, and revenue is really, really good in busier times. So you may see a range. In busier times, we're around here. In slower times, we're around here. And you also might have the same type of thing going on the monthlies, with whether you have different products that take different amounts of time from a labor perspective to actually produce those products. You might have some that are, almost nobody. It's almost robotic in terms of their production. It's done all by machines. And you may have some that are done only by people. And so the ones that are done by machines, you're in a situation where, hey, their productivity is phenomenally good because, i.e., compensation ratio is really, really, really small. And others where you're almost in a situation like a CPA firm or a law firm where the compensation ratios are really high because everything you do is totally dependent upon labor. So what you really want to look at is the types of businesses, mix of products that you have. And then once you know that, you can establish, okay, it should be within this range for these months and within this range for these types of months. So monthly productivity, again, can go up and down and up and down and up and down, depending upon the type of businesses that you're in, the type of seasonality that you're in, the type of products that you are producing, whether they're high labor intensive products or whether they're, high material intensive or almost no material intensive or all material intensive um, products. So, again, look at the range. And if the range, and for a month that's typically slower is down normally, and it's around 40%, and that month it drops to 30%. What did you do right that month? Remember, this is the counterintuitive graph. So lower means better. So just take a look at if you know that the productivity ratio for slower months should be this, or for months where you sell X type of products should be this, and it's not. Figure out what's going on, both from the positive side and from the negative side. You could be, might have found a brand new way to do something. That would have been phenomenal. But, there's other things where people just didn't have the work that was coming in the door or something along those lines. And before somebody asks the question, can you have a productivity ratio higher than 1? And yes, I have seen it. That means literally this week I saw one where a client in the month of December, because there was nothing going on, had a productivity ratio of 102%. That meant $1.02 was going out the door for every dollar in revenue that was coming in the door. And I verified it with him, and he said, yeah, it was that bad in January, because I looked at the numbers and, the numbers added up. And you don't want to have 2 months like, very few months that are like that, because you're not going to be in business very long, because if it's over 100%, you don't even have money to pay the light bill. So you want to make sure that you're in a situation where that is not happening most of the time. Right? So that's the side of it, which is the monthly. When we get back from break, we'll talk about the trailing numbers with respect to the productivity ratio. Thanks for listening to the Financially Fit Business Podcast. We'll be right back.
Financial advisory services are the key to the longevity of the accounting profession. If you want to get started providing advisory services or want a review of a finance course you took in college, Ruth King's manual, Understanding Financial Trends Analysis, might be your first step. This manual gives you the information you need to help your clients with their financial statements. A great start or addition to your financial advisory practice. You help them with clarity on their business's financial health, the ability to spot impending issues and resolve them before they become a major crisis. Less stress and sleepless nights worrying about the financial part of their business. Your Financial Statement Trends Analysis Manual is the reference guide. What do you want in your financial advisory services practice? Click on the link below for more information and to order.
We're back. Thanks for listening to the Financially Fit Business Podcast. Before the break, we talked about the monthly issues with respect to the productivity ratio. And remember that the productivity ratio is the counterintuitive ratio. If the number in the trend is trailing upward, that's not good. And in the beginning, it would have been, let's say it was 60%. You had 60 cents for every dollar that comes in the door spent on payroll and payroll taxes, and then you went up to 80 cents. That means that it is a lot more. So it's counterintuitive. It's not the good way to go through things. So what we're going to do is we want to make sure on a trailing basis that the productivity ratio stays fairly consistent, or it is trending downward. Now, the monthly can go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, depending upon, what type of products are being produced, whether it is a slow or a busy season, seasonality, whether things are mainly robotic and machine, or whether we have large amounts of labor producing whatever the goods and services are. But all of those things should even out in the trailing numbers, because it's a year's worth of data taken a month at a time. So we want to make sure that your trailing productivity trend line is consistent, which in most cases, and with a lot of business, it's fairly consistent, which is good. Or it's trending downward, which is also good. But I find that, over a couple of years, when companies are very, very stable, the trailing productivity ratio is very stable itself. Monthly can be going up and down, up and down, up and down, but trailing has a tendency to be very, very stable. And if it starts going up a little, again, remember, this is the wrong trend. You want to find out why. And a lot of times with respect to gross margin and things along those lines that we've talked about in previous episodes, if a very, very seasoned person leaves, a very, very seasoned person is not, obviously no longer employed, and you don't have people behind that person to be as efficient and as effective and things like that, you're going to see it in the monthly first, but you're also going to see it in the trailing simply because you don't have the same efficiency as you had before. I've also seen interesting things happen with respect to trailing where employees, quote unquote, got religion and they started doing really, really well. Revenue started increasing for the same number of employees and things like that. They started paying attention. They were gold. They started having goals. They started having contests, and you'll see a little decrease in the productivity ratio as a result of that. So we'll see see what happens from that perspective. Um, it might be something that's working really, really well. If you gave if you gave contests and things like that for a long period of time, people will have a tendency to step it up, do better. I don't know any other way to describe it, but they do, and you can see it in little changes in the productivity ratio. The other thing is the raise issue, or the hiring of additional overhead personnel. So if you need a manager, the company has grown to the point where it absolutely has to add a management layer. Guess what happens to productivity in the beginning is we have this management layer, which is a lot of payroll, but we don't have the revenue yet to support that level of payroll. So the revenue has to increase to cover that level of payroll. And for those particular times, you're going to see the productivity ratio increase a little bit. But these are the things explanations for why it happens. And the other major thing that happens is raises. And here's where you're really going to see it. If the level of revenue doesn't increase with the raise increase, i.e., we increase the raises, we have to increase our prices, which means that our revenue should increase. But if they don't, we're going to see the productivity ratio go up a little bit. And this is where I look at it most often and say, okay, did we give raises, but we didn't increase our prices? You can see it with gross margin. You can see it in the overall profitability, P&L ratios. So productivity is really, really important because it's the labor piece of it that makes the products work. It's the management piece of it that helps everything run smoothly. But you also have to have a certain level of revenue to cover that particular management and whenever there have been raises as a result of that. So just be careful with productivity ratio. Again, it's the counterintuitive ratio. If it's going down, it's good. The trend is downward, it's good. If the trend is upward, find out why the trend is upward. Obviously, find out what the company's doing right to make sure that the trend is going downward. So either works. Okay. All right. That's what I wanted to cover with respect to little changes on the P&L. We have done P&L from an overall perspective. We've done P&L from a gross margin perspective, and we've done P&L from a productivity ratio perspective. In future podcasts, I'm going to talk through the little changes in balance sheet trends, the liquidity ratios, current ratio and asset test, receivables to payables, debt to equity, the usage ratios, and working capital. So we'll get through that over the next couple of episodes as we go through this. So thank you for joining us. Choose one thing that you discovered and implement it in your business. These ideas, tactics, and strategies help you make more money, have more free time, and give back. If you like today's program, spread the word. Please review this podcast on any device you're listening to it on. Help a business owner improve the health of his company. For comments or questions, call me at 770-729-8000 or email rking@financiallyfit.business. Thanks for listening. Have a great and profitable day.